when people are in a transaction, they start getting scared. You're not scared because you've done this a million times. So when they say, Shawn, I don't know, should we counter here? Maybe we should just take the offer. I'm like, let's settle down. We counter, okay? We counter the offer and we get you more.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Shawn and Matt Show. My name is Matt. That is Shawn, and welcome to our show. Shawn, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to sell properties in a slow buyer's market. It is Wednesday, September the 10th. Shawn, you and I are both here, which means that neither of us won the Powerball.
Yeah, man.
You know, I'm still holding out for my September 30th Rafal ticket, prize sweepstakes drawing.
Yeah.
For my 46-acre yurt farm.
That's the thing, is you still got hope. That's why people play the lottery. I had high hopes. I thought I was going to win. Like they were saying, like, you go to sleep with caviar dreams and you wake up in reality and it's like, oh my gosh. If you think about how hard that is to win, it's like one in hundreds of millions.
Well, the depressing part is the articles that come out that say what you have a better chance of winning.
Yeah.
And when I saw that I had a better chance of becoming U.S. president, by a long shot, that really just, quells the
yeah, it's like, all right, why waste
excitement.
$20 or whatever?
Yeah, so I spent $20. I won $4. So I basically paid $8 to walk to 7-Eleven twice.
Yeah.
It's the way I look at it.
It happens.
So, Shawn, we are past Labor Day into almost the middle of September. We start to see an additional bump both in listings and buyer activities.
Mm-hmm.
But, right now we've had, 4 straight months of increased inventory, higher days on market. I guess it is a buyer's market in the DC metropolitan area just because of how extreme of a seller's market it has been in the past couple of years. So it begs the question of how do you sell a property in a buyer's market? Now, the easy answer is, price. It's always the price. It's never anything else. It's always the price. But, there are strategies, there are formulas, there are, maybe renovations or improvements that can be done. Because when you look online, whether it's in a single family home neighborhood or whether it's in a condo listing, it seems to me that some properties just sell instantly, go, and others just sit on the market. Why is that?
Oh, Matt, listen, I've been doing this a long time and I've learned so much in selling real estate and what to do and what not to do and how to prep homes and how to price homes. And it comes with some tough learning experiences. And what you first have to know is what the seasonality of real estate is. We all know that the spring market is typically really hot. That's the best time to sell. Then we go into summer, we see the summer doldrums. It's slower. People are on vacation. They want to forget everything. They just don't want to think. They want to be laying on a beach. And then we get into the fall market, which we're hitting now, and we start to see a little bit more of a progression of more listings, more buyer activity. I was talking to one of our lenders yesterday, and he was saying, you know what? I had a horrible year this year, but all of a sudden, I'm starting to see a lot more activity. I'm more busy right now than I've been all year. So that says something. People are seeing the lower interest rates, and they're saying, all right, well, now's my time to get in. I think now's a good time. And seasonally, the fall market then produces the winter market. So the fall market might be picked up a little bit, but then winter market hits. There's still going to be people selling, but you're not going to have the craze that you would any time of year. So if you're going to get your pre-approval letter now, it's a good time because you might find deals and you might find opportunity in listings that are sitting along a little bit longer. But what I'll tell you, if you're a buyer, and in my opinion, man, I saw listings the other day, and I actually talked about this, Matt, where I was like, you know what, I might buy this property. I personally was going to buy this property because I saw so much value in it. The reason there was value in it is, one, it was bank owned, which we don't see a lot, right? We don't see a lot of bank owned properties around here. And so I was like, man, and I saw that the price dropped and dropped and dropped. And once it dropped to this level, I was like, man, there's money in this, right? And I know what the values are when the place is fixed up. Number two, it needed work. And buyers, if you can get beyond this, and as an agent, I have the contractors. So if you're looking to buy something and you can spend 2 to 3 weeks to get or say a month, right, to get the property ready before you move in, you're going to find so much more equity in that property because you can get it at a really good value because it's not showing well. And so that's what I say on a buyer standpoint. Now, on a selling standpoint, you have to be very careful. And there are so many listings that I go into that are just bad. right? You go in and you're like, well, what's this agent doing? Or is this agent telling their client what you have to do to sell in this market, to sell in any market? And so it's number one thing is preparation. And if you are not preparing that listing, you're not going to sell that listing. And I typically take 2 to 3 to even 4 weeks to prep a property before I hit the market. I am not just going in, signing a deal, going to take pictures the next day, and it's on the market. Very few times, because most people don't have their house show ready. And it takes time. Even my house, your house, whoever's, if we're doing it, getting it ready for market, there's so many things I would do to my personal house to get it ready.
So what are those tangible things? I think people want to know is like, what do you actually do? Because I was talking with, a friend, and they said, oh, you just, look up the value on the MLS, and then you price it there, and then you sell it. What else are you doing? And I was like, well, there's actually a lot that happens, under the hood. So what are some tangible things that you'd be doing for a single family house that would get the property ready that maybe some houses that are sitting on the market are not doing?
So I'm going to take this example that I'm doing right now. It's at a property in Arlington. It's going to be listed at about $1.1 million. All right. Before I list this thing, this has been a rental for a long time. So it's beat up a little bit. You have to prepare it. You have to do things. If I sold it the way it was, there's no way I would get 1.1 million for it. And I would get lowball offer after lowball offer, and 60 days on market, 90 days on market, 120 days on market, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there like, what am I doing? So before you go on the market, do the work. I'm telling you, put the money into it. Number one, paint. All right, paint is always going to be your easiest thing to do, most cost-effective way to transfer or transition the entire property. You're going for a light, a light walls like our studio looks. This is actually a light greenish color. I typically use a light tan just to, not a yellowish tint, light tan. And painting the ceilings and everything, all of your trim, all of your doors. It's going to cost a couple $1,000s, but that transforms the entire property. Number two, you got to look at your flooring. You're going to spend, my clients, if it's a condo, 1-bedroom condo, they're going to spend probably $8,000 to $10,000 to prep it. If it's a townhouse, they might spend $20,000 to prep it. If it's a single family house that nothing's been done in a while, you might spend $25,000. I've done that in the past. But this takes knowing contractors, knowing that they can get in at a reasonable time, and knowing what the cost is going to be and make it cost effective for your clients. You do not want to put too much into the property, because then if you're putting too much money into it, you're not going to get it out. So you have to know, how much do I put in, and how quickly can I get it done? So
if you're putting in 10, 15, 20, maybe 25, how much are you getting out of that?
So in this townhouse that I'm doing right now, I'm getting all new carpets. And what I say is no carpet in the living space. All right. This is bedrooms. You can do carpet in the bedroom, and sometimes it's better. So we're replacing all the carpets in the bedrooms. The hardwood floors on the main level and the tile in the entry level are fine. We're keeping those. We're getting a new appliances for $3,000, all new appliances. That's all it takes, $3,000. We're painting the entire place, top to bottom. That's going to cost about $5,500. All right. New carpets, $4,000. So new carpet, $4,000. New paint, $5,500. Next thing is lighting fixtures. We're changing out all the lighting fixtures in the entire house. They're all gold, old stuff, right? You got to get some more modern, either black or your brushed nickel, and replace them all. And when you replace the lighting, you have to make sure you replace the bulbs with a high lumen, soft white bulb. I mean, no one wants the office feel. You want the soft white so it feels good. Next thing we're doing is changing out all of the door handles and hinges. Door handles and hinges cost very little money, and it totally transforms how that property looks. It gives it a more modern feel. So if you've got these old dingy, gold handles, they're ugly. No one wants them. So you can do this for a few $100s, change every one in there. So we're changing it to black. All handles and hinges, black. And then what else are we doing? Oh, the final thing, once we have all of this done, we're staging the property. And I had 4 people. I just put on a listing last week. I had 4 people comment on my staging. Staging is critical. It's crucial. My client, once she saw the cost of the staging, she was like, "Oh, Shawn, are you sure we do this?" And I'm like, "Listen to me. It's $1,800 for this particular condo, and I'm telling you, it'll transform the way that it looks and feels when you walk into a property." I'm not virtually staging a property. I think it sucks, right? And there are my competition was virtually staged. You walk into it and it feels vacant. You know, you want them to feel good when they walk into the property. That's part of the reason we do this. And so I had 4 people say, your staging is amazing in here. So that validated for me that we're doing the right things. And so when you do all of these things, your property is going to sell. And I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or anything like that. But if you look at days on the market for our listings, compare it to the market, you're going to see that ours sell quicker. And why is that? It's because we've taken the 2 to 3 weeks to prepare it and make it look good, and then it'll sell in a week or 2. And my goal is always to sell it in a week. And one last example of this, I've just put on a condo, 2-bedroom, 2-bath in Windsor Plaza. We took, again, 2 weeks to prep this. We put new floors, new paint through the entire place. There was wallpaper in there. I was like, listen, client, you need to get rid of this. And reluctantly, she listened to me. And now we were on the market for 6 days. It's sold under contract. And she was like, Shawn, I can't believe we did this. And I was like, it's because we had a formula and we did the right things. And then if you look at my competition, they were overpriced and they didn't prep. And so they've been on 65 days and 93 days. So you have to know the market. You have to price it right when you're doing this. And you know, you can't inflate the price by $10,000, $20,000 just because you put $10,000, $20,000 into it. You've got to price it at market value and know what your market value is going to get you if you put in the 20 and if you don't. You know, and I can go over this over and over and over again with deals that I've done and comparisons that I've done. And when you do these and you prep them, they're going to sell and they're going to sell well.
How much of this is agent driven versus client driven of, hey, I know my house is a mess. Like I got a budget of $25K, let's do it, versus you having a hard conversation and saying, listen, you got to open up the checkbook if you want to have these sort of results.
I'm pushing, right? I don't want ugly listings. I don't want listings that don't sell.
But okay, so then let's go down the hole of like, when does it not make sense? Because, all right, I get it. You don't like ugly listings, but maybe there's someone out there who's saying, oh, this guy's just blowing his client's money and then the ROI is not there.
No, the ROI is definitely.
What are some examples of maybe you didn't do these things, but what would be some projects where you would not where the client brought it up or it was broached and you said, listen, you know, painting the garage door or, you know, doing something, you know, like that is just not worth the ROI?
Yeah, when you start getting into kitchen cabinets, I have a listing coming up. I haven't seen the property yet. Somebody just reached out to me and said, hey, there's been a renter in there for a long time. I went over what I think that should be done just knowing what a renter can do to properties. I said, is your property original? And he said, yes. So one thing I'm not doing is cabinet work.
Are you just painting them?
Yeah, painting and new floors.
So you're not talking about ripping them out and putting in new cabinets?
Now, I've done it. It's a longer process. It's a way more expensive process. And a lot of times those kitchens can cost you a lot more than you think. So now you can get good deals. You can go to Home Depot and get cabinets for pretty cheap, but they're going to be cheap quality. But it also takes time. It takes a lot more time and it's a lot more money. And so if I can squeak out not doing the kitchen and just making it look as good as possible, and this is going to be coming up, what do I do here? Because I haven't seen the property. I know the cabinets are original. The original cabinets are ugly. But can I spruce these up enough to not spend the $15,000 in doing that? Because once you start getting into that in a condo space, you're starting to spend too much money.
The new cabinets need to match the rest of the kitchen. So if you just have new cabinets and then old appliances, old countertops, old everything else, it's just going to look weird.
You got to spend money. And so that's where you start stopping. And you know, some people are like, in houses, say, my granite counters are old. Should I replace them? I mean, they're granite, right? I mean, yeah, you can get them up to a modern standpoint, but it's, you know, in kitchens in a single family home, it could cost you $5,000 to $10,000 to put new quartz in that kitchen. If you got a huge center island, it's going to cost $12,000, $15,000. So, you know, you can get away with not doing those things. The most crucial things are, I mean, in a single family is decluttering. Get your stuff out of there. Rent a pod. Get your stuff out. If you can get out and have me stage the property, that's even way better. I'd rather you spend the money on getting a place to live before it goes on the market and get out. Let me paint and stage, and that will sell much quicker than you living in the house and having your old furniture and stuff that doesn't work. And believe me, my house is the same way. I see my furniture and I'm like, I can't stand it. Because, you know, you take your house, your furniture from one house into the next and you move it in and then you forget about it. And you're like, and then you look at it and you're like, man, this sucks. Like, I don't like this. Well, neither does half the people that have their houses. They're not show ready. They're livable. They're fine for what you're living in. But when you get it to the market, you don't want your old furniture in there. And so if I can dress it up or even spot stage some places, I'll take furniture out, put it in a pod, say, hey, it's $200 a month to store your stuff. And then let's rent a few items and spruce up the spaces. I've done that many times, single family in Alexandria, in Arlington, everywhere. I've spot staged. And, sometimes it's really difficult when you're having these conversations because the clients start feeling offended. And I always have to walk on eggshells and be like, listen, I'm not offending you. I think your furniture is great and you should come into my house. And I always use myself as an example because, come through my house. It's not great, right? It's not like I have some nice furniture. I have some other not so nice furniture. My hardwood floors, they were in 5 years ago. They kind of suck right now. I hate them. There's certain things about my property I hate. And so I always pull in my personal side of things and I say, listen, I'm not trying to be critical on what you own and what you have. I'm being critical to the real estate market and how they're going to treat you. And if I can get you to do these things, and I'm not trying to offend you because I would do this to my own property, and I have. My Lake Barcroft property, when I sold that, I took half my stuff out and I put it in a pod and I shipped it to Manassas and it sat there for 3 months. And then I staged the other portion and I made it look like no one was living there. And that's what you really want. You want it to be no one's living there, but it's staged and feels warm.
Do you ever drop the line to your clients? Do you give me permission to be brutally honest with you right now?
No, but that's a good line.
If they say yes, you can just say anything under the sun after you say that line. So if there's concern about, hurt feelings, you just preface it and say, hey, can I be honest with you right now?
Yeah, and here's another thing, Matt. Let's bring this example up of when you brought me into a property. Sometimes it's hard for the agent that has a personal relationship with the client to say the tough things. So what do you do? Because, when you're in a relationship and you've tried to get them to do things, there's only so many more things you can get them to do. So then what do? You have an outside voice, an outside eye come in. Do you want to give an example of that? You remember the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I had a listing. It wasn't selling. We had done a lot of prep work. The client was great. She had done so many different iterations of decluttering. Unfortunately, those iterations were still not to the point of decluttering. And I made the mistake of not trying to inconvenience her, right?
Yeah,
because
it's hard sometimes.
This is her chair. She's sitting it. These are her things. But that was just my mistake for not being just brutally honest. I think I was just a little scared and I shouldn't have been. And so I had Shawn come in and just say, these are the things that need to be removed. And we filled up like an entire storage unit with the amount of stuff that was still to be decluttered.
Yeah. And that's the thing is it's like you have to have a second eye sometimes. And not only that, we put carpet in, we put a little small area rug, put other couple little things. We said, hey, why don't you move this piece here? And, and still using her stuff. And then what happened? How long?
And then it sold 5 days later. We got a contract immediately. That's night and day different.
This is the experience in real estate that you have to have. You have to have the eye and you have to say things that might be hard to say. And I can tell that, in 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been saying the things that I'm saying now, right? And I can see the progression of realtors in this. I've been doing this long enough to see, a 5-year real estate agent, 10-year, 15-year. And, some take that progression longer or some are afraid to sell or they just don't have the experience yet to have these conversations. And I see it over and over again. And, I just took a listing over and I'm settling it in 52 minutes. Okay. This property was on the market for 90 days. And I market the area and the person called me and said, Shawn, I was going to use you first, but this agent had a contractor and we did the kitchen and they did some nice things to the property, but they didn't go all the way. And so their listing expired. I took it over and I said, all right, we need to do A, B, and C. And we did those things and I sold it within 2.5 weeks. So I'm telling you, preparation it matters and you have to follow these steps. And if you're not, it's going to sit, it's going to hurt. And you're going to be like, why didn't I do this to begin with? It takes money to sell real estate.
Yeah. If you're living in a property and it's not inconvenient or it's not annoying, you're probably not doing enough.
Right.
It should be annoying to be living in a house and also trying to sell it at the same time. with the amount of, removing the toaster from the countertop for showings and removing all the dishes and all that goes into that. So I think there is some effort on the client's part. And, part of me is thinking, okay, well, from the agent point of view, what would you say to your client being truthful if you knew you couldn't offend them, and then just figure out a way to say that to them without offending them?
Yeah. And the thing is, I've definitely been in places that I've sold. I can give you story after story, but where I spot stage and the people were just like, Shawn, I hate this. I can't live like this. And I'm like, I get it. But you know what? Now I have the marketing at least. I have the marketing to get people into the property. But the other thing is like pulling everything that they live with every day, their coffee maker, their toaster, everything else off of the counters so that you can get the pictures, and you do not want things on the counters. You have to pull it all off. And, my clients went away for a couple of weeks and I was throwing stuff in closets and everything else. And I left it that way until they came back, and they actually came back and I didn't put the stuff back. And they're like, where's my toaster? I'm like, sorry, I had to get it this way for the showings because I wanted to sell it while you were away. And that's the way you do it. So
let's dive into pricing, because I think that is very important, especially while, some people are seeing their values maybe peak or plateau, or, in some cases just be worth less than it was like literally a month ago. Because I know in the DC area, we've got these job cuts, we've got a lot of different things happening. And so a comparable property from 2 months ago, you may have to factor in some sort of depreciation or some sort of, lower value, because the amount of buyers are just not there compared to, a month or 2 months ago. So when you are listing a property in a buyer's market, a slower market, how do you come up with pricing to make sure that you're not underselling the property, but you're not languishing on the market either?
Yeah, you have to know why properties sold where they did. And you have to know experience by looking at these comps and saying, all right, why? Look at the pictures. You have to look at the pictures, but you also have to know and go through these properties. And that's what I do. I mean, I know the market. I know what my competition looks like. And I know, particularly like, I'll just use the condo that I have under contract, 2-bedroom, 2-bath in Windsor Plaza. I've sold so many in Windsor Plaza. I used to live in the building, so I know it really well. I know each floor plan, and I know instantly when somebody's pricing something if they're too high. And, the littlest details, the littlest changes in floor plans can make the difference. And so my competition was overpriced. And, it also depends on the seller. I will tell you that some people, it's funny because you're usually saying, no, it's not worth that. No, it's not worth that. And then other sellers, I'm like, no, it's worth this. It's higher than you thinking, right? You have to think once you put this money in, it's actually worth here. And so when you get that kind of seller, it's a lot easier to price the property where you want because they feel like you're overpricing it. But in some instances, like my client lived there for 20 years and I'm like, listen, no, it's worth more. And she's like, oh, okay. So, but I knew based on my experience in the building that the other competition was priced way too high. I'm talking $30,000 higher than they should have been in this narrow thing. And it's like, why are you pricing it that high? What gives you that? Like, who told you to price it there, right? Mm-hmm. And was it the seller saying, I want this because I have to pay for commissions? That's a lot of the stuff you feel. And, that brings up another thing. So what I'll say is you have to price it right for the market. You have to know the seasonality, like I was saying, spring market, fall market, and summer and winter. They're 4 totally different seasons in how you're pricing it. So you have to be careful, and you're not going to price something like you would in the spring in the winter, mm-hmm. right? And the other thing is, and I've talked about appraisals and things like this that drive you crazy, but negotiations. It's not always the real estate agent. It's also the client that's negotiating, right? And they're negotiating with you, telling you how to negotiate and what they want. And so then I'm going to the buyer or seller or whoever it is, and I'm saying, listen, no, this is what we're going to do. This is what we want. But I always say, like, in appraisals, there should be a variance factor, mm-hmm. right? Like, I hate when an appraiser comes in and, we have a comp here and they're like, nope, it's worth that. I'm like, all right, but aren't there variables in this? Aren't there variables where you should be up or down? Not only that, but think about the owner variable, right? The owner has a lot to say. If they have a huge amount of equity, they're not going to negotiate. They're not going to be like, no. They're going to be like, no, I'm fine with this. Whereas somebody that doesn't have the equity, they're going to be like, no, I have to get this number. I have to get this number. So, two different people with two different sets of equity and two different life plans are going to have two different things that they want. And they're going to price it differently too. Even if you say, no, I think we should price it here, they might say, no, Shawn, I want it gone. I want it gone. And so that appraisal comes in and, the appraisal sees that value and they're like, nope, that's the value. No, there were a lot of factors that went into that and decisions that went into that. And that person was retiring and they just wanted their money and they wanted to live off the rest of their life. Whereas that first-time home buyer is like, no, I got to flip this property and I have to have the equity to buy my next property. And so that is going to produce two different sales. And it doesn't matter how much I push and say ABC, sometimes, properties sell for less than they should maybe. And so I think that there needs to be a variable factor in these appraisals. And I'm just not a fan of appraisals. I just feel like there's...
Really?
Yeah, you can tell, right? Because I've been burned so many times, and I could tell you example after example of how I've been burned and why I can argue that value better than an appraiser, and I still don't get it because that appraiser has all of the power.
On the topic of price, at what point do you have to have the pricing conversation? Because let's say you're 30 days on the market, you're 60 days on the market, property's not selling, it's a slower market, maybe you're getting showings, maybe not. Are you looking at the property and say, all right, well, we really need to, repaint, or we really need to, redo the cabinets or the countertops? Or are you saying, okay, well, clearly we're overpriced?
Hopefully I've already had the conversation about painting cabinets and everything else, and we've already done it. And then if I'm not selling, I'd go by seasonality. In the spring market, I'm saying, in a strong spring market, in 2 weeks, if you're not sold and we've done everything, then you're overpriced. You have to come down.
Well, what about in a slower market where, let's say, it'll take 30 to 45 days to sell the property? Do you hold steady on price knowing it's going to take 30 to 45 days? Mm-hmm. Or are you having a different mindset depending on what happens once you're on the market?
No, you have to see what your traffic is in that listing. So if you're not getting much traffic and you know that the seasonality of it's summer, and you're not going to be dropping your price like you would as quickly as you would. And our market right now, people want to say it's a buyer's market. I still believe it's a seller's market. Things are still selling. It's just not the hyper seller's market that we're used to. I mean, the DC area is amazing for selling real estate. So we're spoiled. We have been in a hyper seller's market. So now it's taking, in a lot of standpoints, 30 days, 45 days to sell a property. So, and it really depends on what you're selling. So I was telling somebody the other day, I'm not holding my line to the 2 weeks anymore. It might be 3 weeks to 4 weeks before we say, all right, we're going to drop the price.
Yeah, because if you're selling like a $3 million new construction home, you're not saying, hey, this thing needs to be gone in 2 weeks.
Right.
You're saying, hey, we've got a great product. They're finishing up construction. This is going to take 6 months. Let's see what happens.
And I'll give you an example of that. I just sold a $2.825 million house. It was 2 years old, right? It was barely lived in. And when I was pricing this thing, I honestly... me and one of the parties were like, we believe the value is the low 2.8s, right? 2.825. That's kind of where we were in that range. One of the other people in the decision-making process was like, no, why would we price it there? Because these properties take longer to sell. Let's price it higher. And I was like, oh my gosh. All right, well, listen, I'm willing to hear you out. And we did, and we priced it higher. Okay. And then we came down but the market started pulling in, and people started seeing it a little bit more. And I'm like, all right, the market was changing. And this was like late spring, early summer. But the strategy actually worked in this instance where we had it priced too high, but we were still getting good showings. And it was, once you get into that luxury market, that higher priced market, like they were saying, like, what's $100,000 in a $2.8 million house? It doesn't mean as much when you're at $100,000 high in a $2.8 million house than if you're in a $400,000 house, right? Mm-hmm. Like pricing is variable, right? And so, $100,000 in that market isn't as much as you would think. And so we ended up doing that. And then after like 30 days, we came down and then we stuck with that price. And we ended up getting 2.825, what the market was going to yield. But had we priced it there at the beginning, would we have sold that quickly? Because those tend to take a little bit longer. So I don't know, It was a learning lesson for me, and I learn every time. And I'm like, well, maybe it was right to kind of cushion that one a little bit.
So you were on the market for 50 days total. It looked like you started at 2.955. You had a price drop maybe about a week or 2 weeks into it down to 2.88. So about almost $100,000 price drop.
And the reason is because we were transitioning from a spring market to a summer market. And I said, guys, listen, this is the time to do it. All right. So it's not always based on days on market, but it could be, what are we transitioning into? A slower summer market. So let's get it gone.
So 12 days after you go on the market, you drop the price $100,000.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like that.
It wasn't 100. It was like $75,000.
Okay. So 12 days on the market, you drop the price $75,000. So, I mean, it seems like that wasn't the plan, but you're adjusting for the market. Is that you weren't getting enough foot traffic?
Yeah. So we wanted to see what the reaction was to the market. Okay. And that's sometimes what you do is, so you find out what the reaction is. And you see, all right, well, maybe his plan wasn't perfect. Maybe we price it in between the two, right? And let's get it down there quickly to see what the reaction is. And so that's what we did. And then it took a little bit longer. We staged the property. I mean, the property looked gorgeous. And that's, again, the property was gorgeous to begin with. You didn't really have to do anything to it, but staging matters. And this was a 6,500 square foot house that we staged 3 levels of it. And it looked amazing. And so that is what you have to do. If you're selling a vacant property, it's like when you walk in, hello. It feels vacant.
How much was staging for a $6,500 property?
It wasn't. It was like $5,000.
$5,000?
It was not $5,000 a month.
I thought it'd be like twice that.
I know. Well, it depends on who you use, right? And
I mean, you go to DC, it's like 3 times that.
You're going to spend so much more. Our old stagers would have charged us a lot more. Nothing against them. They did a great job. But like, this is how I convince people to do this, is finding the people that do a great job that aren't going to gouge your eyes out on pricing. So it's $5,000 for the first 2 months. And then after that, you start paying per month at a lower reduced rate. So, but the thing is, most of mine sell within the month, within a month. This one took 50 some days, but it was a $2.8 million house.
It should take, 50 days for a $3 million house. That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So again, you're going to learn about pricing, but it's important to bounce the ideas off of your fellow agents. Call your agents. Say, hey, what do you think of this price? Can you come through this with me? Tell me what you think, because an outside eye that doesn't have the listing is going to think differently than you that has the listing. And so it's important that you kind of do these factors and call people and get people's opinions. And don't be so like, I know the price, because you don't. Sometimes you don't. And you have to have the experience in different markets to realize what you should be doing.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you have any thoughts on the matter, we'd love to hear them in the comment section down below. Shawn, do you have any closing thoughts, or are you pretty much?
No, I feel like I've talked a lot.
Yeah. I was like, Shawn could have just done this whole show all by himself.
Well, sometimes it gets me rolling, and like the thing I say is like, when you've been doing it long enough, what you've said wrong in the past. You can adjust for those things. You know what markets do. You know what you have to do to properties. You know what it costs to do these things. And that's where the experience of hiring a real estate agent and paying the money that they deserve, it's the knowledge. Knowledge is power. We have the knowledge as real estate agents on what you have to do, and that's why you pay us what you pay us.
Well, it's like you're paying for 24 years of mistakes. Not saying you've made, but just saying like, all right, well, I screwed up on this thing. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. And so 100%. The next seller comes to you, you're like, all right, I have utter confidence that these are what we have to do. And if there's pushback, then you can easily share the story of how things went sideways, and then they come around. Yeah,
and the thing is, last thing is that you have to understand that when people are in a transaction, they start getting scared. You're not scared because you've done this a million times. So when they say, Shawn, I don't know, should we counter here? Maybe we should just take the offer. I'm like, let's settle down. We counter, okay? We counter the offer and we get you more. And this is your time to get more. This is your time to get more price. Don't be scared. And 99 times out of 100, it works. There are instances, and I always say, well, will they walk away? I have had people walk away when I countered them. It's weird. I don't understand it, but it happens. So I have to tell them that. But 99 times out of 100, when you counter, they're taking the counter.
It's part of the game. People are going to walk away, and then some people are going to come back, and
so you have to have a little bit of thicker skin and just say, all right, I'm willing to follow your advice. And we did that, and we ratify, and they're happy. So,
all right, well, let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Hit the thumbs up button if you've enjoyed this conversation. For Shawn and myself, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Take care.